Welcome back. Today we are going to be discussing relations and functions. So, relations and functions. First, we're going to start with a relation. Okay, what is a relation? Okay, a relation is a set of pairs of input and output values. Okay. Now, relations can be represented in 4 ways. Number 1, as ordered pairs. Okay, so simple X, Y, input, output. Number 2 is a mapping diagram, which you probably haven't heard about in a long time, but you did do a little bit of this in elementary, just not to this extent. So what does a mapping diagram look like? So you have your input and you have your output. And you have values within your input and output. So for example, I have 3 different X values and I have 3 different Y values. Now these values must be in numerical order and you will not repeat numbers. So if there's the same number in the output and the input, that's fine, but you wouldn't put the same number twice in the input, okay? From here, the mapping part of it is that you actually use an arrow to connect the information that works together, much like this. So you have a mapping diagram. The third method is a table of values, or in other words, a T-chart. And your last option is to graph on the coordinate plane. So you should hopefully be familiar with 1, 3, and 4, but number 2 should be a little bit new information for you. Okay. And feel free to pause at any time if I am talking too fast or if I am I'm moving my hand too much, okay? Obviously, when I'm recording these things, I don't have that pause factor when I'm waiting for students to write things, so just use the manual pausing. Okay, so we're going to practice a question where we represent a relation in 3 ways. So I'm going to give you one of the 4 methods, and we are going to provide the other 3. So represent the relation in 3 ways. Number 1. So we have a list of ordered pairs. When you create a list of ordered pairs, it is important that you start with a curly bracket so that we know all these values go together. And then we use commas in between each of them to separate the different pairs. So our values are -3, 4, 3, -1, 4, -1, and 4, 3. So let's go ahead and go to our mapping diagram. So yes, you do need to put input and output. You need to make sure you label them. Now you can make rectangles, you can make ovals. I wouldn't suggest necessarily any other shape like triangle or trapezoid or octagon, but typically you're going to see rectangles and ovals for this mapping diagram. So we're going to put our input values from least to greatest without repeating. So my smallest input value, or my X value, is -3. And then my next value is 3. And then my last value is 4, which is used twice, but I only write it once. Then I'm going to do the same for output. So my smallest value is -1, which is used twice, but I'm only going to do it once. Then 3 and 4. Then when you draw your arrows, remember you're matching. So -3, that goes to 4. 3 goes to -1. 4 goes to -1. And 4 goes to 3. And that's how you do a mapping diagram. Okay, let's do our table of values. This one is probably the easiest. You just list it as is. Essentially, you're just rewriting your ordered pairs, but using less parentheses. And that's your table of values. Okay, and let's do a coordinate graph. Now, typically we always say use graph paper, but since we're just doing a basic sketch of a few points, it's okay to do a grid on your lined paper. When we do graphs, it is important that you label and are consistent with your numbering and spacing. Oh, I didn't provide, I need a little bit more room to get to -3. Oops, sorry, kind of squishing that. I also wrote -2 twice. There's my brain. Then we got 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, -2, -3, -4. Okay, probably could have used the lines on that, but I was trying to kind of squeeze them in there. So I'm just going to plot my points. So -3, 4, 3, -1, 4, -1, and 4, 3. Okay, and that's it. Feel free to pause if you need to redo that, but that is how you do a representation in 3 ways. Next, we're going to talk about domain and range. Okay, now domain and range is something that you've discussed before in Algebra 1, but probably haven't thought about it since then. So, what is domain? What is range? Domain is the set of input values of ordered pairs. Your range is the set of output values of your ordered pairs. Okay. There's not necessarily an easy way to remember that domain is input and range is output. Or in other words, domain is your X values and range is your Y values. But it's just something that we have to remember for math. So let's do the next types of problems, which is what is the domain and range of the following. So, and I'm going to actually list out our ordered pairs again. Right. And if you notice, they are the same numbers that we did number 1. And that's for a reason. So you can see a little trick to help you out. Okay. Domain and range are very similar to a mapping diagram in the sense that you have your input and output grouped together separately. You are listing from least to greatest, and you are not repeating. So in other words, it's almost as if you're taking what you've already done, if you've done a mapping diagram, and writing it in a different way. So your domain, when listing multiple numbers, we use a curly bracket. So least to greatest, without repeating would be -3, 3, and 4. And my range from least to greatest without repeating would be -1, 3, and 4. So again, numerical order and do not repeat numbers. Now again, do not repeat numbers means within the same set. So obviously 3 and 4 are both an input, are both in the domain and range, but that doesn't mean I don't include them in both. That just means I'm not repeating the -1 and I'm not repeating the 4. Okay. For number 3, I'm going to list the information. And I'm going to pause for dramatic effect for you to try that one. So go ahead and pause it and give the domain and range to find the answer. Okay, did you pause it? If not, you can go to our next video to find the answer.